Good morning. Lights on. Here we go. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm so glad. My name is Jen, and I want you to know that there is one thing that I can do that my husband cannot, and that is coordinate my outfit with our topic. So there's that. We are in the last week of We the Free. And so this was actually not totally thought out, but when I opened my drawer and saw it, I was like, perfect. Marcus could never do that. I can. And today we're going to talk in the last chapter, chapter 6, and how to live beyond yourself. In my 20s, I was a part of a program that we traveled really all over the world. Here in the U.S., we would go to more of the inner city projects across the country. And then oftentimes we would travel to other parts of the world, other countries. And so I had the privilege a couple of times to go to the Philippines. And my first trip there, I know, right? Okay. Balut, all that. I did it. Okay. So when I was 20, it was my first trip there. And of course, we flew into Manila, which is the large metropolitan city where there's, some of their technology at that point was even ahead of ours, I think. But then that's not where we stayed. They took us far out beyond into one village, if that's what you want to call it, and it was called the Payates, and it was basically a dump site. And this dump site was just that. It was huge mounds of garbage that they had, families had come to make their life there. And they were going to live off of the garbage. They would dig through it to create things to sell and provide. And they really didn't have, I use the term homes loosely. They were literally, obviously, mud floors. And then they just had made walls from mud and other materials to get it to stick together. There were windows, but the windows were just cutouts for air to blow in and out, which obviously the stench was very, very bad. And so a friend of mine and myself, we stayed there overnight with a family in one of these homes. And I remember laying there in bed trying to sleep, but the stink so bad, and pigs literally squealing past the window that we were laying on a box, basically, and just pigs squealing. I had to go to the bathroom, and there was no running water. And so we just were up most of the night. We got very little sleep, and the circumstances were so, to me, dire and grim. And I remember that morning when we woke up, the family that was hosting us, we could hear them singing in the next room. And I did grow up in church, and so it was a song that I recognized from when I was a little girl, probably in the early 80s. And they sang, "Give thanks with a grateful heart, give thanks unto the Holy One, give thanks because he's given Jesus Christ, his Son." And I remember turning to my friend saying, we got to get over ourselves. We got to get over ourselves. Because these people were singing thanks to God for all that he had done, all that they had, all that they were. And it was a dump. And I came home from that trip at 20 years old, and I said, I got to refuse to make this life all about me. Because what God has is a life of me living beyond myself. And we're going to take a look at chapter 6 in Galatians right now and look to how God instructs and enables us to do that. So if you'll look at the screens and you have it in your outlines, and I'm just going to read through this chapter. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should be gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. Be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. If you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. You're not that important. Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else. For we each are responsible for our own conduct. Those who are taught the word of God should provide for their teachers, sharing all good things with them. Don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. So how do we live beyond ourselves? The first thing we've got to do is I refuse to make life all about me. That first verse says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should be gentle and humble and help that person back." All of Galatians is instructing us on we don't have to earn our salvation. Salvation comes by grace. So now we're just a bunch of sinners now living together that have been saved by grace. So how do we kind of do this life together with under that understanding? And Galatians 5 has told us of what things we can expect when the Holy Spirit is in control of our lives. It kind of told us, like, this is what you can expect for your life. Now Galatians 6 is going to instruct us on and let us know what's going to flow out of that and tell us how we can relate to one another when we walk in step with the Holy Spirit. Another translation of that scripture says, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression." Caught in this case, it doesn't mean, aha, I caught you, busted. It's not that. It's not that at all. We're not responsible for going and looking for other people's sins. That's not our job. It's not our job to go around hoping to catch someone doing wrong. Jesus addresses this repeatedly in the New Testament. In Matthew chapter 7, it says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." It is not our duty as Christians, as churchgoers, as followers of Christ, it's not our duty to go around and police the sinners, to probe people's lives, looking for the skeletons in their closets. We've all got them, and it's not our job to go around and try to find the skeletons in each other's closets. What Paul is meaning here, and what the Greek actually is saying in the word overcome, those who are overcome with sin, it means trapped. It means entangled. That's what sin does to us. It entangles us. In Hebrews, in the great book of faith, it talks about how can we run this life? How can we really win in life and run the race? And in Hebrews, it says, "Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles." Easily entangles. That's what sin does. It easily winds up all around us, and we get stuck. We get stuck in sin in the same way as we can get stuck in quicksand. And the harder we try to fight it, so often the worse it gets, because it's a pattern in our life. It's the things that entangle us, they're the patterns in our life that are enslaving. They're things like addiction. We don't want it. It's entangled us. It's a pattern. It's gossip. I don't think anybody wants to go around and be spreading bad stuff about everyone. It's just like it entangles you. You get stuck in it. It's negativity. It's control. It's even fear. We don't want to walk around handcuffed to fear, but it entangles us so easily. So the people around us often get stuck in something they shouldn't be doing. We get stuck in things we shouldn't be doing. Galatians 5, last week we learned that it's for our freedom that Christ set us free. And it says, "It is for freedom that Christ set us free." This isn't in your notes, but the scripture goes on to say, "Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." We learned that sin is something that you can get yoked to. You can get hooked up with, and you become enslaved to it. And it's that guy that you look down your nose at and you say, "I can't believe that he keeps on doing it over and over, the same thing. Why doesn't he just stop?" Or that girl that you frown upon and you say, "Well, if she would just knock it off, doesn't she get it?" But the chances are, on their own, they can't get out of it. They're tangled up. And they need freedom that only comes through Christ. That freedom's only going to come from Christ. But oftentimes, Christ sends us to go show them Jesus and to go help them get unstuck. We're going to Kauai tomorrow. My family is hopping on a plane. I know, poor us. And this is a trip that we have been looking forward to it's probably been booked for 6 months. We've had it planned for so long that at the end of the year, last year, my daughter, who is in 5th grade, Tatum, she has to do a personal learning project for her school, and she chose the topic of Kauai, actually, and she figured out all the things that we could do, the hikes we could go on, the best beaches, the best places to eat, great food and local stuff, and so she did a lot of research, and we actually have some friends who live on the island. And so in our research, of course, we were learning about the best places to snorkel. And we learned, they told us this story and how they were out snorkeling. And obviously, there's a lot of sea turtles. And they had been out snorkeling, and there was actually a fishing boat with a 50-pound fishing line that had dropped into the water. And a sea turtle had swam up next to it, and actually Flipper had gotten all entangled in this 50-pound fishing line. And the Flipper was like sort of up, and so there was nothing that this turtle could do to swim out of it or get away from it, and it couldn't get its head up enough to get his head above water to get any oxygen, and this turtle was so entangled it was going to die. And our friends saw it, and so they live on the island, and they quickly rushed back. They went and got some big old, cutters, some plier things to swim back out. And they went and they started snipping the fishing line, this 50-pound fishing line, so that the sea turtle could be released from what was entangling it, go get back on the right path, and have life. And so often, that's what we're dealing with sin. We're entangled. We can't come up for air, and we need someone to come and just help snip that line. And that is what this is talking about in Galatians 6:1. Dealing with sin should always have restoration in mind. It's always about helping the person get back on the right path. Dealing with sin is not about punishing the guilty. The priority is reconciliation. Reconciliation with God, reconciliation in relationship to get back on the right path. Moving toward what is right, helping the one who's fallen to get back to where they belong so that they can have real life, freedom. And how we do this really matters. It is commanding us in the second part of that first verse, you should be gentle and humble when you help that person back on the right path. Gentleness is commanded. How often is our reaction to sin something that could be described as gentleness? Gentleness doesn't mean that we're saying, oh, it's okay. Gentleness doesn't mean being dismissive to spare the person's feelings. Gentleness means that you are clear in your intent to not harm the person, but to help them. It means communicating in humility and tenderness, respecting the fact that this person is probably already feeling enough guilt and shame on their own. Gentleness is how Jesus responds to those trapped in sin. When you're in sin, do you need somebody coming up and saying, shame on you? You've already put enough shame on yourself. The guilt is already so thick that you can hardly come up for air. And so Jesus is saying, go help. Go restore. Don't shame. Go help them break free to get back on the right path. And it makes me think of how Jesus handled this. In John chapter 8, there's a story of a woman who was caught in adultery. She had been sleeping around quite a bit. And Jesus found her, and, right? I mean, that's what she was doing. So, but what Jesus did is he's like, hey, what you've been doing is wrong. I know what you've been doing, and it's wrong. But let me help you. His goal was to help. I'm not interested. Jesus was not interested in seeing her punished. He was interested in seeing her be made whole. When do we ever see Jesus get harsh through the scriptures with people that are in sin? He isn't harsh with the dirty sinners. He's not harsh with the prostitutes. He's not harsh with the tax collectors. He's not harsh with those that are caught in adultery, the drunks, the drug dealers, the addicts. Those are not the folks that Jesus is harsh with. The people that are harsh with that are the Pharisees, which were the religious people, which were the people that thought they were better than everybody else. And honestly, that's who Jesus was harsh with. That's the ones that got an earful from Jesus. It was the religious people, the self-righteous, the arrogant, the condescending, the ones who were certain that they were right and everybody else was the other. Everyone else is the sinner. They thought life was all about them. They thought life was all about them. And Jesus is saying, oh, no. Don't make life all about you. Where are those that condemn you, woman? That's what he said. Where are those that condemn you? Neither do I. Let me break you free. Stop this and go sin no more. That's how Jesus helps the sinner out. In verse 2, it goes on to say, bear another's burdens. So we're going to go to them and then we're going to bear each other's burdens. And in this way, you will obey the law of Christ. I think it would be helpful to kind of define what a burden is. And I kind of looked through different things, and for me, the best definition I came up with for a burden was anything that threatens to crush the joy of our faith. Anything that just threatens that joy of our faith, whether that's a tragedy that threatens to make us doubt God's goodness, or it's a sin, something that we are physically doing that is dragging us down into that guilt and judgment and taking us away from that good path God has for us. And it's not merely the burdens of those who stumble into sin. I think that burdens that we need to help carry with one another include things like guilt and worry, sorrow, anxiety. It's not just physical stuff that we need to help bear each other's burdens. A burden is more than that. It's mental. It's emotional. It's basically anything heavy in your life, whatever that might look like. That is your burden. And God is instructing us to bear one another's burdens. And then he says that's how you obey the law of Christ. And I know this whole entire series has been out, but we're free from the law. And we are saved by grace. And in chapter 5, it said really the only law of God is that we love one another. And so how we obey the law is by bearing each other's burdens, which means love each other. And how we do that can be so very simple. This week, in fact, 2 days ago, my daughter, who really planned our Kauai trip, broke her arm. And it was very sad and very disappointing because it obviously really impacts our trip to Kauai. And she did it on Thursday night. And so we had a full day of events. Every kid had taken a friend, and we went to Aquatica during the day. Then I went, and we had a few other activities, so I had like 10 kids in my car. We went through the drive-thru at In-N-Out, came home, I fed them all, and then I said, hey, why don't you guys go out on the trampoline while we're waiting for everybody's parents to come pick them up and give mom a minute, basically. And so a few short minutes after that, with everything still kind of in chaos in the house, In-N-Out wrappers everywhere, wet towels, and craziness everywhere, flip-flops strung all over, one of the kids comes running up and says, Jen, Tatum broke her arm. And there's a mom thing that kind of in your gut, I'm like, I haven't seen her yet, but I think it's true just by the tone of this kid's voice. And so we quickly, sure enough, it was obviously broke, and I left a bunch of kids in my house and told all their parents, hurry quick because I got to take Tatum. And we went, and we were there for most of the night into the morning because it was late, and we were in ER. And Tatum had to be casted up to her armpit. And we came home kind of early the next morning, and Tatum got in my bed, and I began making phone calls all over Southern California, determined that somebody would please give me a waterproof cast. And I called every orthopedic office in this entire area. I was going to drive to Mexico because I assumed they do not have the laws we have. They will give me an orthopedic cast or a waterproof cast. And it's a broken arm. Come on, somebody. I was not taking no for an answer. And Tatum was sad, and she was teary because she was disappointed. And our home became very heavy. And a friend called and said, "Can I come over?" And my response was, honestly, I don't want to talk, but yeah. And when she showed up with a tall vanilla bean frappuccino with extra caramel and whipped cream for my 11-year-old. And it was the first smile I saw on her face in 24 hours. And that right there was enough to start lifting the burden. It was a $4 drink. It was showing up. And all of a sudden, things started getting lighter. And I was on the phone, calling everybody in the entire county, begging for help. Somebody, please, we got to make a way. And I was really discouraged, and the tears were flowing, and I sat on my table, which was still covered in In-N-Out wrappers with wet towels still strung everywhere and crumbs of French fries because I had had a house full, and I looked around, and I'm like, ugh. And my friend said nothing. She just came, grabbed a trash bag, started clearing off countertops, started sweeping the floor, and said, all right, I gotta go. And I'm gonna tell you, she did not have answers. She could not fix problems. She held space. And that is how you bear each other's burdens. You do not have to know everything. You do not have to have the solution. You just come alongside, and it helps to bear the burden that is so deep for the people in our lives. That is how we do it. And it doesn't require much time or much money. And Galatians reminds us that the whole law of God is fulfilled in that one sentence. Bear each other's burdens. Love one another as you have loved yourself. Every act of compassion and self-sacrifice on behalf of others is a practical means of displaying the love of Christ. And therefore, you're fulfilling God's law, and we are all set free. I think some of you come in here and you wonder, what am I supposed to do with my life? What in the world could I do with my life? And I want you to know, you can live this out. You can refuse to accept that life and believe that life is all about you. And how you do that, here's a vocation for you. Here's something that you can do that's going to bring you more satisfaction than if you became a millionaire 10 times over. You can develop the extraordinary skill for detecting burdens of others and devote yourself daily to making them lighter. You do that faithfully, and your own burden will not seem so heavy. Carry each other's burdens. It doesn't take much, but even that sometimes can feel like, but I got my own. I got my own, and I want to tell you that's okay, because here's number 2. I will not rely on my own strength. I will not rely on my own strength. Verse 3, Galatians 6:3 says this, if you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. You are not that important. That is quite a verse. I kind of like that straight talk. I looked it up in a bunch of different translations because I was like, did he just say that? He just said that. The Message says, if you think you are too good for that, you are badly deceived. You are not too good. And I think what's important to look at is the context of this scripture, because Paul's kind of telling us who's actually in danger. So at the beginning, he's talking about all these people who have been overtaken by sin, and that, somebody's sin has come to light. Someone's been overcome. He's been caught spending the weekend with another woman. Her lie to the welfare people has been detected. His tax evasion was discovered. The source of the rumor has been found. Her constant belittling of her husband has been spread for all to see. There is sin in the camp, and everybody knows it. And it's who is in danger here? Paul spends 5 verses previously talking about danger, danger, caution, caution. But this verse is not about that one. It's not about the one who has fallen. This one is a warning directed not to the one who has fallen, but to the one who could help. This is a warning to those that can actually help bear the burden cut the line, set someone free to life. About 7 years ago now, 8, because I was pregnant with my 4th kiddo, who is 7. So it was like maybe late 2009, early 2010, I was pregnant with her. And it was the middle of July, and Marcus and I decided before she was born, let's get away, because we knew we weren't going to be sleeping for the next year, and we could go, right? We could go, stay in Vegas for a couple nights, and just have some fun together. And we drove, and Marcus and I, we like pre-owned cars, not used cars, pre-owned cars. And so at that time, I think we had an 89 Honda Accord, and it was like 2009. So, I mean, not terribly old, just 20 years old, and I think he had purchased it pre-owned as well. So, awesome. But we're driving across the desert, and if you've ever driven on those highways to the desert from here to Vegas, I know some of you have driven it more often than you would like to have, but it's really hot, and our car started to overheat. Okay. No big deal, right? It's going to be okay. Well, right about the midpoint where there is nothing from either way, like there's nothing 80 miles up toward Vegas and there's nothing 80 miles back toward Vegas. We are smack in the center of nowhere. Our car totally dies. It overheats, it dies. I'm pregnant. Marcus is stressed. We did have some water, and so I know nothing about cars. I'm not going to pretend to, but I know he started pouring water on stuff, which then now we have no water, so he's like, my wife's going to dehydrate. This is going to be this horrible thing. And I'm telling you, we were standing on the side of the road, like, okay, it's 120 degrees. It's death out there, and we're trying to stay alive, and people are like, you know who's going past us? Like, tons and tons and tons and tons of cars who are just on their way to go have a great time in the land of entertainment. And we're like, and everybody's like, well, isn't that cute? They're waving at us. Not a single person even slowed down. They didn't even slow down to be like, hey, are you okay? No, they just kept zipping by, and we stood there. And finally, we had tried calling a couple towing companies. No one would come. Because it's like they're going to have to drive an hour and 10 minutes to get us. It was not worth their money. I don't know how much they would have got, but they were like saying, it's not worth my time. You're not worth my time. You're definitely not worth the money that I'm going to get. So finally, Marcus called his insurance agent who lives up in San Francisco. I guess it's our insurance agent too, but I don't pay that bill. So he called him, and he's like, Dave, my wife is pregnant. We are stuck in the middle of nowhere. Can you help us? And he's like, man, I'll call around. And he finally found a company that would come and tow. And so in drives, like about an hour later, in comes this guy in this tow truck. And I got to be honest, it seemed a little shady. I was a little bit nervous because I was about to have an hour and 10-minute drive, like smack up next to this dude, because there's only a 3-passenger right there in the front. So it was like guy, shady guy, me, Marcus. And of course, I was like, am I sitting in the middle? Yes, you are sitting in the middle. And so here I am, and I want you to know this guy, he chatted me up for an hour and 10 minutes, and I'm talkative, and this guy way outdid me. I said nothing for an hour and 10 minutes, which is pretty amazing. Those who know me are like, nah, no, it's true. And so this guy began to just share his life, and he began to tell me the story from when he was a teenager until now. And this guy had a lot of life happen to him and a lot of hard life, and he was actually a recovering meth addict. And he was in recovery, and he was doing good, and he had told me all of the pains of his past, the regrets, the mistakes, but now he was on a better path, and he was recovering. And of all of the people that are driving past me that could help, the one who helps me is the one who needed the most help himself. Because everybody else driving by was thinking, no, I got better things to do. I think I'm too good to stop. But the one who helped me was the one who needed the most help himself. And as we pulled up, he took us to a Honda dealer that was just a little bit outside of Vegas. And I kind of laughed, and I'm like, well, figures. I mean, this is an 89 Accord. Maybe Marcus and I need to kind of up our preference on pre-owned vehicles. This thing is like 20 years old. It's no wonder that it stalled out here in the middle of the desert. And he said, oh, girl, He's like, I pick up Ferraris. I pick up Porsches. I pick up high-end Mercedes. There is no one out here that is too good for stalling out on these hot roads in the middle of summer. No one too good that doesn't need my help. And I thought, there is no one. If you think you are too good, you are badly deceived. The word of God remains that our failure to fulfill the law of Christ by loving our neighbor as ourselves is because sometimes we think we're something that we're not. And Paul writes another letter to the church in Corinthians, and he says, hey, listen, don't rely on your own strength, whether you feel like you're too good or not good enough, because I am crucified with Christ. Therefore, I no longer live. It's Christ that lives in me. And that's what enables you to go and help others. And refuse, you do not have to rely on your own strength. And you also need to remember that you are not good. There is no one too good to go and help that of another. And number 3, I will remain focused on the blessing God's goodness has in store for me. Verse 9, it says, so let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. I think probably the worst enemy of enthusiasm is time. It's time. Human beings have a remarkable and sad capacity for getting tired of wonderful things. I bet every single one of you in here can think of something that you were really enthusiastic about recently. Something you were so excited to do, be a part of, and now that joy has faded. Your first day of vacation on the coast, and there was this breathtaking sunset, but by the end of the vacation, you barely even noticed the sunset. Vacationers get tired of sunsets, millionaires get tired of money, kids get tired of toys, and Christians get tired of doing good. At first, the excitement of teaching in Center Kids was strong. You were fired up about going and helping a bunch of kids that you can all hear screaming out there right now. But now you have grown weary of well-doing, and the thrill is gone. At first, you felt really strong about God leading you to do a small group and welcoming people in your home. But now, you're getting tired of those people, and it's lost a little bit of lackluster, and you're not sure you want to inconvenience yourself and open your home up every single week. For those of you who've been coming here for a while, at first you were excited to get here early and stay late and welcome all the people that were coming, and it's so exciting. And now you're the last to come and the first to go because you got in a little bit of weariness from doing good. Some of you got excited about starting to read the Bible, work in an emergency shelter, but now you grow weary in well-doing. The inner power and the joy has seeped away, and it's become a chore. You've lost heart. And what Galatians is telling us, it's saying, let's not get tired of doing good. In time, we will have a harvest if we don't give up. It doesn't mean, of course, that you can never stop one job and start another. That's not what it's saying. It's not, and if you ask, really, what is the well-doing that we must not get tired of? It was found in Galatians 5:22. It's the fruits of the Spirit. It's not growing weary and being patient and kind and good and faithful and gentle and self-controlled. It's not growing weary of manifesting your peace and joy and all kinds of acts of love to your neighbors or your coworkers and your family. Marcus talked last week about how an apple tree doesn't grow weary of growing apples. It just does because it's so connected to the trunk, to the root, that it just naturally does. And that's the same thing with us. It's not about doing more. It's just becoming so deeply connected with the vine, with God, that it's just a natural overflow, and that we wouldn't grow weary in producing that kind of fruit and living our ways in that and carrying each other's burdens and serving each other in those capacities. Nothing is sadder than an apple tree that doesn't grow apples. In short, don't lose heart in spending yourself through love. This is the purpose that we were each given by God. When Tatum broke her arm on Thursday night, I have to tell you that I was sad. I was extremely disappointed, and I personally I thought a good thing was ruined. And I began forecasting I started telling a story to myself, and forecasting what was supposed to be good was now something that was going to scar her for life. I literally said that. This trip will now scar her for life. She is 11 years old. She is at a critical time in her precious little adolescence, and she is going to go on this trip, and it's going to be torture, sitting on the sidelines, watching everybody else have fun, and she will be ruined. Honest. I asked Marcus, I'm like, can you please call the airlines? Can you please find out what it would take to cancel all of our flights? Done. Over. Quit. Obviously, I have a few people in my life that can talk some sense, and we decided that that was a ridiculous decision based on all the good that could come from it. And I actually was challenged at one point to go talk to Tatum and to go ask Tatum what Tatum thought. And I went by her bed because she was laying there propped because we're trying to get the swelling down before we get on that plane. And I said, hey, Tate, do you want to stay home from Kauai? I'll stay home with you. In fact, I'll make everybody stay home because I'm the mom and I can do that. Do you want to just not go? And with big old tears in her eyes, she said, no, Mom, I want to go. We can't just give up. And I get that because I'm a yes girl too. I'm a front row sitter. I'm an edge of my seat. I'll take one for the team kind of girl. And that's why when my husband came to me 3 years ago and he said to me, hey, Jen, we're going to go plant a church in Barrio Logan, just me and you and a couple of friends. What do you say? I said yes. Because at 19 years old, God radically got a hold of my heart and my life, and I was so undone for Jesus that I just have been saying yes to him ever since. So honestly, when he came and asked me that, I didn't really think about it because the answer was already, well, yes. I want to go do good. I want to go make a difference. I want to go serve God. And we planted Center Church, and we launched that church, and you know what was a strong start? It wasn't as scary as I had anticipated. I love this city. I loved the people who were doing it with us, and I loved the people that I knew that I was going to meet. And God provided miraculously for even our very basic needs at that time. And I was like, this is just the beginning. It's awesome. And then it got hard. The doing good got hard. And I very quickly felt inadequate. I almost immediately felt very insignificant. I experienced rejection like I haven't experienced in my entire life. It was hard for my ego. It was hard for my confidence. It was really hard on my faith. Not everyone thought our church was great. And more than that, not everyone thought I was. We had limited resources, and I had to do things that I personally never dreamed of. And for those of you who weren't here in the early years, you're really glad that your kids weren't, because I ran Center Kids. And I really love my 4 children, but that's about it. And so every single week, I was over across in a different room because it was much smaller then, and we used a small room. In fact, I think there were 7 kids, and 4 of them were mine. And every single week, we sang the same song because it's what I thought was cool, and what I have since learned was not that cool. But if you want to be a coconut, you can't be a fruit of the Spirit, because the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, over and over and over and over. And I was trying to get in my cardio, and I was honestly just trying to keep them busy and wear them out, and that's what we did every week. And I mean, so aren't you glad you hadn't been at Center Church 3 years ago? But it was hard. And I drove to church every Sunday in those early years, honestly coming down 25th the same way that I do now, wondering, is anyone going to show up? I've always been a very passionate worshiper, but I closed my eyes tighter than ever in those early years simply because I was so scared to open them and see that maybe nobody was here. But you know what? God always was. God always was. And every week, as I would drive down 25th, hoping to do some good, wanting to make a difference, God would say to me, Jen, don't give up. Jen, stay hopeful. Jen, stick it out. Jen, push through it. In Isaiah 43, it says, when you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel. I didn't drown. I didn't burn up. I'm still standing. And it's really just because I didn't quit. And as a result, my dependence on God is greater than ever. My love for him is actually richer now than it was before. My understanding of his faithfulness and goodness is so much more because I've had to rely on his power. I have fueled myself and filled myself up with those promises that says, if you don't quit, I got something for you on the other side. And when the external pressure was strong, I wasn't crushed because the internal fortitude of him in our lives and in my life is so much greater. I know Jesus more now than I did 3 years ago before I started doing this good thing. Way more now. I love him more. I love his people more. And I have seen a harvest just in these past few months like something I've not experienced. And I got to tell you the truth, I haven't done much here in the last 3 months. I just didn't quit. And in the last 3 months, we have seen things like Center Kids Camp. I told you there were 7 people in a room and me singing, if you want to be a coconut, you can't be the fruit of the Spirit. I don't even know if that makes sense, but that's what I did. And there were 7 of us. And this was our Center Kids Camp back in July. And there's a lot of kids there, and that doesn't even represent all of them. And it's not about the number, but it is about the impact. And it is about the lives that were changed. And it is about all of those kids that had a fun experience, learning to worship God, learning to rely on him at an early age so they can prevent some of the sin that so easily entangles. And then the following week, we went on to have Center Students Camp. There was no junior hires here 3 years ago. And now look at it. We were able to do our own camp with a bunch of kids that obviously encountered God, and then they were able to create a little community. Those kids are thick. They're tight. They're growing. And they've got leaders that did not exist before, that now exist, that love them passionately and that are helping them when they don't want their parents to help them so that they won't get caught in the sin that so easily entangles. And then last weekend, we had our baptisms. And this is people that, because of doing good, have said yes to Jesus and then didn't just stop there. They said, oh, I want to boldly say yes. I want to tell everybody. I've decided. And then just the last 2 days, all of these couples, all of these marriages here that are saying, I want to stay married, and I recognize that to do that, I got to invite God smack into the center. Smack into the center. The hope, the joy, the desire for him and his kingdom is stronger, honestly, because it's been hard. It's been really, that is so rewarding to me because it hasn't been easy. It has actually been hard. And the temptation to grow weary in doing good oftentimes is just quit. Give up. Stop. This is hard. But you know what? Most often, the right thing and the hard thing are the same thing. And going to Kauai with a cast up to your armpit tomorrow while all of your cousins and all of your family is out splashing in the waves is going to be hard. But we're not going to quit because there's something beautiful in store on the other side of this airplane trip that's going to be beautiful for my Tatum. And the right thing and the hard thing are often the same thing. And God's goodness and his promises and his blessings are on the other side. So let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up.